The term director's cut is often associated with film. My name is Couch Coop. When I hear it, I immediately think of Blade Runner 1997. But we had two video games 2 years ago release under the director's cut umbrella. Those noises you can hear on Cyberpunk, that's the gear change. That's the haptic feedback on the pads that was added further down the line. Visuals and haptics are going to be one of our first stops when we look at these two games, and I want to just give you a bit of background to where I'm up to with both of them. Enjoyed Death Stranding and Ghosts on the PlayStation 4 Pro extensively. They were amazing games, they won loads of awards. Although it probably wasn't, it did feel like to me that these director's cuts were released very close to their initial base game release date. And every major AAA PlayStation 4 game was coming out with free of charge PlayStation 5 upgrades. Borderlands 3 is a great example. Doom Eternal gave us an absolutely cracking free upgrade with ray tracing, and we had The Witcher 3 within that same bracket. I am a bit of a natural miser, so shelling out for what was really full cost at the time seemed extortionate to me. But years have gone past, and both titles are now available on PlayStation Extra. That's £11 for a month, and you've got about 150 other games on there, and there's some juicy local co-op which I've plucked out. That's coming up on a new video. Thought it was a great time to A, not have to part with any major cash, to be able to look at these two versions, and B, talk about them from a perspective of someone who's very used to those base level systems, including the Pro, and how both the games perform without any director's cut additions. And that brings us over to the visuals and what we're actually looking at throughout this entire video. Both games captured on their full quality modes, and both games only come with two graphic settings. I was expecting some mid-level material, but it's kind of all or nothing. Here's the really good news: flawless quality modes on both titles. So this is the first time I've seen these two games behave like this. Over on the PlayStation 4 Pro there were some visual adjustments. That's the screen on the right hand side here, but you can straight up see shuddery frames going past as we do the standard pan. My god, does Death Stranding look good as its director's cut mode. I'm so annoyed it took me that long to get to it, and I'm now only enjoying these visuals that the PlayStation 5 puts out for this title, but it all very much wowed me, and I was slightly gutted I didn't put my hand in my pocket earlier. Ghost is doing things to me that I didn't know possible in a video game. Some of the visuals and the bar that they've set for this open world samurai classic, and it is going to go down as an absolute classic in video game history, is almost inconceivable. I will say, around the horse's feet and the water mechanics, if you go back and look at Red Dead 2 or something that's in that Rockstar engine, they aren't that advanced. But where it lacks in those directions, it more than makes up for in weather effects and mist, the way it clings to the land, and all of that detailed movement on the grass, and every goddamn blade being almost individually animated. I mean, I could get nothing done. You guys know my issue with capture and rabbit in the headlight syndrome. I was run over a couple of times. The detail thing is just obscene. You cannot see it at 1080, and I've also got a larger 60-inch television, so blowing this up at 4K, really getting to see some of those pixel by pixel details that they've put in within the main protagonist himself and the environments. Little things like the sand giving way as those hooves add weight. Director's cut ups what I did not think was a feasible notch. Keeping one foot in the graphics camp still, we still technically are on visuals. I wanted to tell you guys if any of the water elements or landscape elements within Death Stranding were jumping out at me after going into this new director's version, and it wasn't like knocking me off my chair. It's just that crisp clarity and smooth animation, both with the cameras and with everything that's going on around you, very much increases the immersion. And with Hellblade 2 out, there's a lot of talk on social media about photorealism and environments, and Death Stranding totally got there first, I think. My first Fury moment there, and we will get to the gameplay. We are nearly out of the visual section, I promise. Let's talk haptic. Let's talk about the feedback on the pad and what's changed with having this upgraded to essentially a current gen system. Now, my haptic issues are not the nicest. I feel that the first game I ever played on my PlayStation 5, just by luck would have it, is the best game with haptic feedback. No, it's not Astrobot, it is Returnal. Some of the pulses, the clicking and ticking, and the resistance on the triggers is kind of unbeaten with a lot of follow-up titles. I would say Forbidden West has a very good resistance on drawing the bow, but none of these games really rock my world with haptic application. This does have it all ticking over in cutscenes. You feel the pulses when things go weird with BB and the BTs. There's certainly something going on with the pad, but it's not blowing my mind like Returnal did. That mentioning of Zero Dawn earlier, there are some similarities with that draw bow resistance on R2. It's not really enough, and you do get some clicks and whistles out of the pad if you've got some incoming danger. None of it really distracts you, however, but what does, the noises coming out of the pad, you do get a lot of the wind sound when you're leisurely walking around, and you also have some of that sort of leaf and rustling aesthetic come through, but it's not life-changing. If I remember correctly, most of that PlayStation 4 content comes with the noises from the pad. It's more of a 8th generation gimmick. It's not something I get on with too well. If you've got kids or if you don't want stuff coming out of your controller other than your headphones, it can be quite disturbing, and that brings us over to Death Stranding. So BB, the baby, the unborn child that you're carrying around in an artificial incubator, will cry very loudly out of the pad. You've never heard anything like it. It's one of these things where you're like, oh, my neighbour's going to come round. It is something I would recommend turning off because there's enough going on screen with having that added element. I'm not too sure what Kojima was thinking. It is a bit spooky. I will say one thing about Death Stranding, and I play a lot of horror games. It's actually one of my more favoured genres, and nothing gets me more stressed out than those goddamn scenes. They're horrific, but they're really good. Tension is unbeatable. For a game which is essentially about making deliveries, it packs a massive punch on the horror, suspense, sci-fi level. Still on the visual change front, but not that big a one. Obviously Monster is not branded within that game anymore. That's actually quite refreshing, no pun intended. You still have Norman Reedus' show come round when he takes a number 2, but that sponsorship was right in your face. I imagine Kojima needed the funds and money, wasn't getting enough from Sony presumably, but almost immediately you will notice that that private rehabilitation room is a lot less sponsorship heavy. You're a part of me and I'm a part of you. Let's talk about added content. I think that's one of the more important pillars for making the purchase on this director's cut front. Loads of new levels, new armors, new skins, that sort of thing. We do have less, I feel, in Ghosts than we do see in Death Stranding, which we'll get to. You do have some new featured sections to the map. You can pet foxes, but that was also included in an update that went on both platforms. Now the synopsis boasts that you have that co-op content, which was also given to you for free if you still had the base level version of this game. So I'm not falling over myself with all of this extra gear, missions and characters, or even a sneaky bit of DLC. The major strength for Ghosts the Director's Cut are these visuals, seeing the game as it's supposed to be in this luscious 4K and amazing HDR implementation. Icky Island is actually really good. I am being quite harsh on this, and having a new game plus mode added is definitely a bonus, but that was something we maybe should have been seeing in day one. What I will say about Ghosts, however, is having these higher specs visually really does change how fluid that combat is. I mean, it was hectic anyway, but all of the effects, all of the flashbangs in your grenade, come in finally comfortable with the muscle memory on the R2 and L2s to switch out ordnance right in the middle of combat. It was something I just could never do in the panic, but now I can adjust things depending on what's coming at me and getting that fourth stance. Seeing this game with all these new specs and visuals and crisp, beautiful graphics and what I consider quite changed combat because of that boost, it's really given me a great injection of enthusiasm to go back through that game again. And hell yes, I'm going to be finishing this on the director's cut version. Let's go back to the mentioned start of the video with the director's cut and what essentially they are. And it's supposed to be the director's ideal vision of their film, their project, with, additions added. Look at the Ridley stuff with new endings and large pieces removed and replaced. Kojima really didn't hold back with the amount of content that he pumped in to this DC. There's a whole new section in the form of the ruined factory. There are new vehicles. There's even car racetrack put in and smooth road. You've got loads of variables on color and change and customization on the bike and even the four-wheel vehicles. You can replay the boss fights, and if you know how spectacular they are, having them like one and done was super annoying. Seeing them again is amazing. And leaderboards. There's loads of it. This one has again given me another incentive to go right the way through the entire game again. And that doesn't even cover, like the Ghost point, the visual jump and how much that improves the immersion with these horror scenes. That includes the pad and BB driving you crazy. So what's your conclusion, Coop? Well, these two games were absolutely amazing in the first place, and they have just been given a brand new lick of paint and some nuggets to incentivize me to go back through them all again. Would I have paid all that money for them on day one? Knowing what I know now and seeing is quite literally believing, I have changed my stance on the amount of money they were charging for these two video games. That stance does encompass their accessible price and the fact that they're over on the PlayStation Network on the extra subscription, however, but that is still excellent value for money. And if you haven't gone to these games since launch and haven't looked at these director's cuts modes, man, you're in for a hell of a treat. I did want to mention, you heard me talk about Delivery Man and a delivery game. This is so much more than that, and you catch yourself having what I call a Kojima moment, when you're just escaped with the protagonist. You are deep within the feelings of this game. Very few titles give that to us anymore, and Kojima may have been the founder of that sort of emotion. It's incredible stuff. Ghosts is also going to get run under scrutiny massively with the release of the new Assassin's Creed, which is basically set in an identical genre. It's going to be one big showdown. I was Couch Coop. Look at these graphics. I will see you down there.
You're an errand boy.